want to keep my channel mostly PG, but I gotta say, WandaVision is fucking amazing.
Language.
So, oh my god, like, this was my most anticipated show of the year if you watched my last video, and oh my god, right off the bat, like, this is living up to the hype so far. So, it's right away, it feels like it's not just a show. This is the next MCU movie. This is the start of Phase 4. It was originally supposed to be Black Widow, but you know what? I'm so happy it's WandaVision. This is like, this might end up being the best thing in the MCU thus far. So if WandaVision is any indication, not only will Phase 4 not be a disappointment like some thought after how grand Phase 3 of the MCU was, I think it could very well end up being the best phase yet. It's really like, the fact that they're starting with WandaVision for the new phase after such a long gap from the MCU is perfect, because it's starting in such an unexpected sort of way. It's not just continuing on as we thought we expected to. No, we're thrown into the middle of this, probably like the strangest situation we've ever been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we really don't know what's going on yet. There's a few little hints. So I just want to say right off the bat, this is going to be a spoiler review. So if you haven't watched WandaVision's episodes 1 and 2, because both premiered, so I'm just reviewing both of them together as the premiere, then go and watch them both, and then come back and watch this. So the first episode starts off as Wanda and Vision seem to have just been married, and they get home and they actually purchase a house. But again, as we know, they're living in sort of this 50s black and white sitcom world, and they have their own theme song and everything playing, but they don't realize that anything is strange at this point. So they're settling into their new house. A new nosy neighbor comes by, and they sort of realize as they interact with other characters in this world that they don't actually know how they got there. When they try to think of what their past is, they don't know. So Wanda and Vision don't remember what has happened in the MCU so far. So what's so genius about sort of how this is actually playing out so far is not only does it actually very much works as a 50s style sitcom, but it actually feels overall like really it's just going to be one long movie, which is what I think all these Disney Plus Marvel shows are going to be. And it's working in the sense of the episodes are structured like a 50s style sitcom, but there's just enough hints of what really is going on to keep the audience intrigued in the bigger picture. And probably for some people probably are gonna not be as crazy about it as me, because it's black and white and it might be a little old school for them, because intentionally so, that they might be turned off. But I think any true Marvel fans will be all over this, and I think this is just the most exciting thing Marvel's has tried thus far. And to be fair, they only could do something this wild and cool with all the buildup of the first 3 phases. So just to address that quickly, I think some people actually were very against the idea of the Marvel universe seeming to continue after Phase 3 because it ended with Endgame basically. So people thought that should be the end. But I've never been on that boat. I think what they created with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, some movies are better than others, but at the end of the day, they are all just, they're never gonna make something like this again. It would just be like a waste to throw it all away. Why reboot and start over when they have this? Basically, the way I see it, I think, sure, the first 3 phases, the Infinity Saga is the story of Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, and their arcs are complete throughout that. That's a complete story, yes. But really, I see the first 3 phases, the entire Infinity Saga, as simply I think it's really just setting the table these past 10 years or so for what the MCU is going to be. I think it's just beginning, and we see, yes, maybe it won't all be movies, but really what they're doing now is they're able to tell different kinds of stories, but this feels like a movie. This is not a show. This is going to be like a 6-hour movie, 5 or 6 hour movie or whatever. Each episode's around 30 minutes, it seems so far. Similar to The Mandalorian. But I've got to say, I love The Mandalorian, and I already think WandaVision is a superior show. I think what they're doing in this, Mandalorian also has amazing production value, but just already, like, sometimes the acting can be a little shaky in that show. Some of the acting and dialogue. This one, I mean, to be fair, they're simulating 50s style sitcom, so maybe I'm being easier on it in that way because the dialogue's supposed to be a little more simplistic. But from what I can tell, this is already just the act, like Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany as Wanda Maximoff and Vision. It's already just their acting is as good as it's ever been in the movies, and it's so fascinating to just see how, especially Wanda, or her superhero name Scarlet Witch, how she's just evolved. She's such a different character than she was when we first saw her back in the second Avengers movie in 2015's Age of Ultron. And I've loved her since then. She sort of, her voice is completely different for one thing. Her accent has completely vanished, her Sokovian or Russian accent or whatever you want to call it. Basically, there is in each episode, there is, like I said, an actual sort of contained sitcom-like plot that makes the bulk of the episode, but then there's also hints of what's coming, and we know if you watch the trailer, it's gonna be big stuff, and I don't think they're holding back at all. And to be fair, we finally see the first of the MCU's new Phase 4 Marvel Studios logo at the beginning. Like, this is where we're seeing it. We're not seeing it in the movies for the first time. This is the start of Phase 4, not Black Widow, and I'm really happy about that because I'm excited for Black Widow, but I don't have nearly as high hopes for it being anywhere near as good as WandaVision of what I've just seen so far and what I'm expecting. So the first episode, as I said, basically revolves around this sort of very funny 50s sitcom plot of basically Vision and Wanda. So it does address their superpowers. They know that they have superpowers, but they don't know really why or how they came to be where they are. Vision still knows he's a robot or an android or whatever, and he does know to hide his appearance when he goes out in the world. That's sort of the premise. It's like they take the premise of the characters but then apply it as if it was the premise for a 50s sitcom, which is really just genius. So Wanda knows she has magic powers. She knows she can make things float around and do all sorts of crazy things when she needs to, and Vision knows that he has to sort of disguise himself as he was able to always in the Marvel movies in a more human looking form when he's out in public. But basically it is them trying to blend in, so it's sort of that could have been like a 50s sitcom show. It could have been like some robot and some witch living together. I mean, probably not, but it could have been, and it could have been funny to see how they fit in even without the overall grander story. That could have been an actual sitcom in the 50s, which is part of what makes this so freaking cool. So seeing them, so basically the first episode, they're trying to, they see on the calendar, Wanda sees as her neighbor comes over that there's a heart on the calendar, and her neighbor sort of assumes, oh, it must be their anniversary, and she asks if that's their anniversary, and Wanda's not really sure, because like I said, they don't actually remember what their past is, so she doesn't know, and then she assumes, oh, well, it's got a heart on it, and I guess what else would it be? It must be our anniversary. So then Vision doesn't really know either, so they're kind of like trying to avoid each other because they don't want to let the other one know that they don't know what it is. And then when Vision shows up he has a new job, which I'm assuming he probably doesn't really know how he got that either, but suddenly he's there, he's working at this new job for the first time, and then his boss comes and basically says that, oh, you're ready for the dinner on this day, and then we realize it's the day that's on the calendar, and we find out his boss's last name is Hart. So basically Vision put a heart on the calendar, or probably he put a heart on the calendar but doesn't remember, because they don't seem to remember anything before the episode starts, and he put a heart because it's the day they're having his boss, Mr. Hart, and his wife over, Mr. and Mrs. Hart, over for dinner. And basically it's this whole thing that at this job where he works at, that the employees have to have the boss over, and if it doesn't go well, they get fired. It shows one guy who gets fired, so pretty ridiculous, over the top, but it really fits in the 50s kind of sitcom setting. And it's just really funny how then when they realize what's happened, that he shows up at their house, Vision, but he's got the boss with him, and then Wanda's got this whole thing planned because she thinks it's her anniversary because the neighbor has talked her up to be all romantic and everything about their anniversary. And so it's a very awkward situation ensues, and Wanda actually accidentally sort of does a flirty surprise on the boss instead of on Vision, and then they quickly try to cover it up, and she tries to whip up a whole meal with the help of the neighbor and using her superpowers. And that's a whole fun little gimmick going on about how they need to kind of hide what they're doing, and that's exactly the kind of thing you could see if there was some kind of sitcom in the 50s about some supernatural couple trying to blend in and hide their powers. And it's just amazing how it works on both those levels. It's because we know something different is going on in the MCU, but it's also it's a great 50s sitcom, straight up. Even without the whole, we know, like, with what grander stuff is happening, we know that this isn't all real, and we keep hearing at the end of the episode, both episodes, we hear this voice, like someone saying, "Wanda, who's doing this to you?" And we don't know. We don't know who's doing this to Wanda, and I think I do have some ideas, but we don't know for sure yet. And I don't know who the voice is either, who's saying that. So I'm very curious who the voice is. I can't really think of anyone it sounds like in particular. I'm assuming it's someone we know in the MCU who knows Wanda, but I can't think of who it would be exactly, to be honest. So that's the whole episode, sort of, basically. And I won't go into like too many more spoilers than that, but it really works really well, and then it hooks you at the end even more. And then it sort of ends with like the title or credits as if it's actually the character starring in the show, not the actors. So it's still within the sort of world of the show, these credits, not the actual credits for the WandaVision series. And you see it, instead of, it's not Elizabeth Olsen's name showing up as Wanda Maximoff. No, it's Wanda Maximoff showing up as Wanda, and then Vision showing up as Vision in the credits. And then it zooms out, and then you see, suddenly everything's in color. There's this whole like world outside of this black and white world. So someone has got this whole like simulation set up. We don't know how, and we're hearing through a radio someone trying to get through to Wanda, who's trying to help her, like, "Wanda, who's doing this to you?" So I was like having chills just this entire first episode. And then I think it's great though that we get a second episode. So because it's really the second episode, I mean, someone like me, I'm gonna be hooked, but I think the second episode will really hook people in who might not have been hooked by that first episode. It sort of really is a two-parter in a way, because it's not till the second episode that you really get some bigger hints as to what's going on. Okay, so now getting into episode 2, basically we'll go, so the overall, it's once again, there's sort of a sitcom sort of premise just for that episode that again works as just a sitcom, even without the whole grander Marvel thing going on, which again, that's something that's so genius about the show thus far. So basically in the second episode, now that they've settled into their new home and their new married life, they're both trying to basically fit in more and get involved in their community. And so there's sort of like a magic show happening, a magic show for the kids, I guess, for the school children in the area to raise money for it. People buy tickets for it. So the thing that's genius about this, obviously, is that Wanda and Vision do have magic powers, or what would be considered magic, and they're trying to basically do the show and sort of subtly hint that it is fake so that no one suspects they have magic powers, which there's just so many amazing character sort of things happening in this. This is the MCU operating at just peak capacity. I won't be shocked if I think these Disney Plus shows, since they basically are really just going to be miniseries that are movies ultimately in their own right. So I think they're going to be, maybe they'll rank them all sometime along with the movies. I think maybe other shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daredevil, all that, those are shows. Those are TV shows. You don't need to rank them with the rest of the MCU. I think these Disney Plus shows, if WandaVision is any indication, you will rank them as you rank the movies. You will rank them just against the movies because they are of that quality, they are of that caliber. And if WandaVision keeps getting better and better, I think it could be like my favorite thing in the MCU. I think it could top like Infinity War, first Iron Man. I mean, it's up there already. Like, I'm so happy that this is like sort of the first show of the year and the first really thing I'm reviewing on my channel, because this is just fucking cool. I'm really excited about where this is going, and I'm sorry, I'm trying not to swear, but this has got me really excited.
Steve, you said a bad language word. Did you tell everyone?
The whole magic act thing is really fun to watch them sort of go about that. And there's even one thing to mention that's sort of cool by the second episode. it sort of introduces another reason why it's good they have two that come out the first day. There's an entire like sort of animated, like 2D old school, like animated black and white opening, and a whole theme song like for the WandaVision theme song basically for their show that's only introduced in the second episode. And I believe not only is the score for the show done by Christoph Beck, he did both Ant-Man movies, I believe, but he also, just one thing mentioning, he did both Frozen movies, the scores, and then also I think Kristen Anderson and Bobby Lopez, who are a couple who wrote actually all the songs, like Let It Go and stuff for both Frozen movies, are actually doing I guess they do the songs for this, because there are some songs like the WandaVision theme song. And it's just so many things. You can see this is why the MCU is working so well, because it's not just Marvel operating on its own. There's Disney backing it, and there's just so many unexpected ways that you can fit in sort of Disney's bag of tricks into what the MCU is. So this is just another way. Everything's just so far, like, I was just so happy during this episode, and I think it's just, even though it's not a movie, it sort of feels like the first big movie of 2021, because like I said, this just doesn't feel like a show even. This is something much more like, I mean, inherently it feels like a 50s sitcom show. They've nailed that part. But the overall thing feels like a 50s sitcom show being done within a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, not a Marvel Cinematic Universe show. So the whole magic act thing is pretty fun to watch, and that's sort of the basic sort of premise for the show that doesn't really have a huge impact so far on what's happening overall. But then the second episode, there are more sort of instances of things happening where things are sort of breaking through. In the first episode, there's a scene where sort of you kind of really tell everything's not right, and then again a few times in the second episode, there's certain things where you can tell everything's not right, and even some sort of hints of color coming in to the black and white world in the second episode. And I think it's really it's exciting that basically there is one thing that I think is worth noting, that they might have just told us already who's behind this, because maybe that's not really going to be what the big twist of the show is, who's behind this. But there is an ad. There's a few ads throughout this, sort of just 50s style ads sort of pop up in the middle of the episode, and one of them is for a watch, and it's Strucker. The watch is Strucker, and it has the Hydra symbol on it. So Strucker is one of the Hydra sort of leaders that's around in the MCU. I think still, I don't think he was killed off. I think the last time we saw him was in Age of Ultron at the beginning. Also, the first time we saw Wanda Maximoff. Actually, he's the one that, he's the one that experimented on her. He's the one that gave Wanda and her brother Quicksilver their powers. We see him at the end of the Winter Soldier. He's the one sort of with the little monocle. He's the one giving them their powers, and he has that really cool line at the end of the Winter Soldier after credits saying there's nothing
More horrifying than a miracle.
Nothing more terrifying than a miracle. So he's the one that gives them their powers. So it's actually, okay, I sort of decided within this review, I think he's the one behind it, because that's actually perfect, that it's sort of coming full circle from where Wanda began with him. And I think there's a good chance he'll be the villain of this series. Like, Hydra in general we know is involved already, but I think him specifically, it would be fitting that he's sort of the one that Wanda is going up against, the villain for this series, if this is sort of her first movie. He's kind of never been a main villain, as she's never been a main character, so it's fitting that he's the one that kind of becomes her ultimate enemy in her first kind of solo, I'm just gonna call it a movie, because that's really what this thing is already, and I mean that in the best of ways. One other thing I just want to mention that I think was just such a nice touch, it was just such an example of what kind of nice touches are going on and what level they're thinking on for making this really feel authentically like a simulation of a 50s sitcom show, is even in like the editing and the cutting. Like, specifically an example is there's a part where they realize they don't actually have wedding rings. So Wanda, just with her magic powers, because she just shows their hands, and then she just sort of makes wedding rings appear, and you can even see on their hands sort of that they sort of move a bit. So there's clearly like sort of a cut or whatever, like a jump cut, like there would be back then, because back then they didn't have the technology to just make a CGI wedding ring appear. No, they had to actually like cut to a different shot where suddenly it's on. So now it actually, it feels like it was actually made in the 50s in that sense, at least when it's supposed to be. And of course, near the end, there is, of course, near the end, the big twist, or, I mean, we knew it was coming from the trailer, but we do know near the end of episode 2, Wanda not only is everything suddenly coming into color, so it's kind of indicating, okay, next week's sort of episode is going to be maybe in the, I'm guessing it would be maybe, it must be like the 70s at least then to be color TV, I'm thinking, or for it to be, it looks like it might be like the 70s, I don't know, maybe the 60s. So, because it is going to be moving through different sort of eras of sitcom. Like, you know, the first 2 episodes, again, why they sort of fit together nicely as a 2-parter where they were both the 50s style setting. But so next week we're going to be moving into color TV, and so I think that alone, again, that's a nice, you don't need some of that for someone like me, but again, that's why I think episode 2 was necessary as a hook for the people that aren't hooked by episode 1, because it's like, okay, if the black and white wasn't for you, don't worry, color is coming for next week. And on top of that, the other big twist, as everything's coming to color, just sort of magically, Wanda realizes she's pregnant. And yeah, I don't know everything about sort of, I know that's sort of a plot line in the comics. I love Wanda, but there's a lot I don't know about her in the comics, so I'm very curious to see where that goes. And I think that'll be huge for the MCU. I think her children are going to be somewhat important, I think, to sort of the whole MCU going forward, not just the show. So I think everything by the end of that episode, okay, going color for all those who weren't fully on board for the black and white, and I was, but I'm excited to see that the show's evolving, and, well, to see exactly why whoever's behind this, whether it's Strucker or whatnot, why they're putting them through this simulation where they're going through the different eras of sitcom television will be very interesting to see, and I couldn't be more excited, and I absolutely loved WandaVision. Near the end, it's pretty clear what's going on, I think, just in terms of that it's very much clear that it's Hydra who's behind this to some extent, and someone is trying to get through to Wanda, and I'm very, very curious to see where this goes. So I'm super excited about this show, and I'm definitely going to be reviewing it every week. So I hope you'll join me next time, and I hope you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week for the review of episode 3 of WandaVision. Take care. Bye.
And for gosh sake, watch your language.